for joining us for another episode of The Little Radio Show, where we bring you small talk about big topics. This week is our Mother's Day episode. We have a wonderful conversation with Ashley Amanda from A New Mom in a New Era blog, and we have a little bit of a conversation amongst us about what motherhood means and what are some of the myths and preconceptions about moms in the U.S. and abroad, and some nice memories and funny stories from our own moms. Mom, please forgive us. Just a reminder that you can catch us every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time on hmsnetradio.org. You can find our show archives and the link to our iTunes and Stitcher channel at thelittleradioshow.com.
So speaking of Mother's Day and, what it means to be a mother and a young mother in this day and age, we spoke to a local Houston up-and-coming influencer whose blog is New Mom in a New Era, talking about Ashley Amanda. And Ashley had some interesting things to say just about her experience as being a young mother. She's in her early 20s. And, sometimes she gets, she feels like there's a misconception in terms of young mothers and, what it means to be a young mother. So we talked to some degree in terms of that and what some of those misconceptions are and why Ashley feels they're not necessarily true all the time.
I'm 21, and when I don't have makeup on, I look like I'm 10. And for me, I don't put makeup on every day. I go to the grocery store, I don't have makeup on. I'm trying to not wear makeup unless I have to. And so when I go to the grocery store, they're like, "Oh, is that your sister?" Like, no, that's my daughter. And so, and the looks you get are like, aren't you a little young to be a mother? And so there are a lot of misconceptions. I guess 16 and pregnant kind of put like a different spin, like a negative tone on being young and pregnant. But it was a choice. And my daughter wasn't a mistake. Like, she didn't just like, "Oh, I'm pregnant." It was, we were trying because when I was in the military, I was told that by some doctors that it would be really hard for me to have a baby. So, and the older I would get, it would just get worse. So I wanted a child. So we tried, and about a year later, we had our baby. I just want people to know that if you see a mom and she looks really young, don't always automatically assume that the baby was a mistake. And it shouldn't take a ring on it, because when people look at the ring on my finger, they're like, "Oh, you're married." So that automatically that makes it better, because there's a man in my life that is helping me take care of my kid. Like, they stayed around. It doesn't matter if somebody's married or if they're single. If they have a baby, you shouldn't pass judgment on their character.
So I think that's something that we can all relate to because, we've all gone through that process. And I think as you age, you kind of start to see things a little bit differently. And it just makes you understand maybe some of the things that your parents did or that our parents did when we were younger a little bit better. And that's another thing that we talked about with Ashley. And she kind of explained how, now that she is a mother herself, she really sees differently her role as a daughter, and to the degree that now she's counseling her own sisters or talking to her own sisters and being like, "Hey, let's not be so hard on mom."
I feel like I put her through so much as a teenager, and now I'm like, and I see my own sisters putting her through worse, and I feel like I talk to them and I tell them, like, "Hey, this is hard work. Like, you shouldn't be giving your mom so much crap all the time, because she does do a lot for us." So it does open your eyes, like, "Oh, okay, like maybe I shouldn't have done all those things. Maybe I should have taken it a little easier." She does do a lot, and a lot goes into being a mom.
But before she was a young mother, right as she became a young mother, really Ashley had an experience that motivated her to start her blog and to start communicating and building a community, because she sort of had a traumatic birthing experience that led to what was postpartum depression, or was in the beginnings of postpartum depression. And so she didn't want that to be a part of her life, and she didn't realize that there were so many other women out there that were being affected by the same topic until she wrote her first blog post about it.
I felt like I was getting postpartum depression, and I felt myself just go into that pit, and I didn't want to do that to myself or my daughter. So writing has always been an outlet for me, and I felt like if I just got it out and I just put it out there, that I would feel so much better. And when I did put it out there, and when I did share it, so many other women, they felt the same way I did. They had a similar experience, and for me, knowing that I'm not the only one going through this, it made me feel a lot better, and it gave me a kind of community to talk to, and for me not to fall into that postpartum depression that I felt like I was going into.
If you're just tuning in, this is the Little Radio Show on hmsnetradio.org. Many of you may not know this, but in a lot of Latin American countries, Mother's Day is May 10th, regardless of what day it falls on. It could be on Sunday, on the second Sunday of the month, and it sometimes falls like in the U.S., or it can be on a Tuesday, or it can be on a Friday. My dad was born on May 10th. And so,
lucky.
So there's a story in the little town where my family is from. Like, you know how there's a rash of births, and I use that word on purpose. There's this this little cluster of births, and it looks like a whole bunch of people have kids all at the same time, and they all had girls. And my dad was the only boy that was born in the neighborhood that was a boy, and he was born on Mother's Day.
Oh, that's funny.
So my grandma always said that he was her Mother's Day gift.
Oh, that's because and he was a boy, not
Yes.
because he was a boy, but and because it was a girl, and there were so many girls, and he was
Yes.
the boy.
So
Yeah.
my grandma used to lord it over all of her neighbors that she's the one who had the boy that year. Just to say that, and segueing into a Mother's Day conversation and following up from the great interview and segment that Juan did with Ashley Amanda, is that
From New Mommy, New Era.
yes, motherhood in the U.S. is very, very interesting.
Different.
Yes, I don't have kids. Obviously, I don't have kids. I have nieces and nephews. I spoil them rotten. I have lots of friends who have children. I have my sisters who I helped during their pregnancy and during their after
I totally
time.
thought you were going to say help raise. And I was
No, I did not help raise my sisters. I helped raise their kids because it takes a village.
Oh, that's funny.
So I'm Tia Sandra.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I do get the question a lot that don't I think I'm going to regret not having had children when I grow older. Now, it's not like I made a decision, oh, I'm not going to have any kids. It just sort of happened like that. I've never brought the conversation up, I think, on the show, but I had to have a hysterectomy because of medical reasons. And, you know, I wasn't young at that point. It came as no shock to me. It was expected. I told my mother, and my mother's first reaction was basically, but you're not going to have any kids. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, Mom, my age, I'm single. I wasn't having any kids anyway. And her response was, well, you don't know that.
But what do you think people? Why do you think people are so shocked when they find out that you're not gonna have any kids?
Because I'm Latina and I'm supposed to. It's sort of one of the missions of my life is supposed to be to reproduce. I think the biggest thing though isn't that I don't have children. Is that I'm fine with it. And that's the part people have the biggest problem with. I had friends asking me. I had a friend asking me if I was going to freeze my eggs before the hysterectomy. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, to do what with? I don't understand. What am I supposed to do with frozen eggs at my age? No, that kind of thing. I've had nurses ask me whether or not I was able to have any children before my surgery. There's this.
Their bedside manners got very inappropriate.
Yes, but there's this sentiment, whether they know that they're showing it or not, that by not having children, I somehow didn't meet one of my requirements. I lack something. There's something missing from my life. Mm-hmm. I love my nieces and nephews. And I have no doubt that if I had had children, I would have loved them too. But I don't feel now, even several years after the surgery, even, going into my middle-aged little life, I don't think that my life is lacking,
right.
that I, somehow failed to meet my goal in life by not having kids. Now.
And that's interesting given the fact that, now the families the quote-unquote American families are much smaller. Like, people aren't having as many kids as they used to.
Some people aren't having kids at all.
Yeah, like a lot of people are choosing not to have kids, but there's still that expectation.
But it's not really an accepted choice.
No, they still are getting a lot of pushback with people who believe children is the way of path of any.
My youngest sister has one son, and you have no idea how much family feedback and friendly advice she got about not having him as an only child. Oh my God, like, she was going to ruin that kid. You're going to ruin that kid. He needs a sibling. You need to have another kid. And people telling her this, and she's like, are you going to support him? Another child? Seriously?
Well, Edgar is an only child, and I still get those conversations to this day about shouldn't you be on like child
Sweetie,
4?
You have about 10 childbearing years ahead of you. You're going to get the conversation for a while.
But I do still get that conversation. It's like, how do you so you start going through a life story with them, like, this is X, Y, and Z, but is that really necessary? Should even sometimes when I first meet people, it's not immediate that I tell them that I have children. I'm going to be really honest. Maybe you should get to know me first before you get to know the rest of my extended family. And I do feel like that. But I stopped. I was one of those annoying people. And I have to admit, and whoever I did this to, I'm so sorry, that I was very much like, do you have kids? Why don't you have kids? How many kids are you going to have? And it was my own... that was me.
So your attitude changed.
My attitude has changed. It has. It's not that. I don't think it's necessarily any of my business. I like to get to know people. I really, really do. And if that's an offering or that's a conversation they like to open up, then I don't. I'm tend not to be more intrusive as I used to be, as to ask questions. Why? But why? Tell me.
You mean
why.
less nosy?
Yeah.
But I do have friends who are my age who even just a few years ago were still. They really wanted children. Mm-hmm. They, really wanted children. I have a friend who suffers from infertility issues, and the emotional toll that took on her, she felt like she had failed. Her body had failed her, and she had failed everybody.
And you see, the attitude that we even take on with them is even more like, oh, pobrecita, you'll be okay. You can always adopt. But we shouldn't be like that. We should sympathize. We should sympathize with what's happening, what's going on, if that's what they want to receive. I don't need to sympathize. I don't need to be sympathetic to somebody who doesn't want children. That's not what they're needing from me. What they're needing from me is an interaction as a human being on that level, not like, hey, you need to reproduce because you're an animal. But you know what I'm saying?
So even if you have kids, okay, I get the questions and the comments and the, concerned because I don't have kids. And if you do get kids, then you get the, oh, you're not raising them right.
Yeah,
or you're not being the right kind
spectrum
of mom, etc. Oh, you didn't take long enough for maternity leave. What do you mean you're going back to work? You're not going to stay home with your child? You don't love him?
But that's an interesting topic that you bring up, because actually we were just having this conversation the other day, and we were talking, Angelica was talking about how the, postpartum depression is such a huge thing here in the U.S.
It is. I suffered from it.
And not that it's not in Latin America, but, I think the point you were making is that in Latin America, you don't only take care of the baby after it's born.
Oh, I went on a rant. I dug in because I couldn't tell anybody else, and Juan was the one in front of me. So I told him, I think I told him off for the rest of the people. So those who are out there who are with me, I told somebody off for us. But my thing was that here in America, it is a little bit different. You know, those Cuaresma that we do after the baby's born, which is like the 40 days after a baby's born, you take care of baby and mom. Yeah. And here, I feel that sometimes it's like, oh, you had a baby, and like, like, why aren't you up like 2 days later? Where, you poor ladies, they're at the grocery store with their infant babies, like 2 weeks old. And I've seen this happen time and time again. And it's not a bad thing. What I'm saying is that.
Yeah, it is.
It's what I'm saying is that there's a time to recuperate. I mean, can you imagine that kind of surgery entails if you didn't have a baby and you had to have, if you pushed a watermelon from places like that.
Oh, no. I was
but my thing is, please don't imagine that.
I was in the not in the birthing room, but I was in with my sisters during like the entire.
I have a funny birthing story.
The entire time.
I have a very funny birthing story. My niece does. I remember I was in the room with my niece, and my niece stopped pushing at one point, and she was like, "It hurts, it hurts, it hurts." We're like, "Yes, you're giving birth. This is okay." And she's like, "No, but really, 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 I swear it does." I was like. She has 4 kids now. Yeah. And that was baby number 2 that she was complaining about.
My funny story is my younger sister, the middle sister, her first pregnancy. Oh, she was a young mom. She had her first child, early 20s, right? Went to, I think it was her first or her second childbirth class, right? My sister, my youngest sister went with her. And the woman who's giving the class is going through and explaining about why really it's not good for the baby for you to get anesthesia, get the thing. Yeah. And she's going through, and my sister raised her hand. She goes, "So when do I sign up for the for the epidural?" And the woman's like, but really? And she said the whole thing. Yeah. When do I sign up for the epidural?
When did that happen?
My sister was getting the epidural, and the one was trying to shame her and not to do it. And my sister's like, "Yeah."
I have another story. I have another story on that, but I want to continue with this one in regards to allowing these ladies to actually fully recover, because it's not only a physical process, it's a mental process. Yeah. You just. The pain, the anguish that you feel you're the only one going through this pain, and literally there is no somebody else giving birth in the same room as you are. It might be within the hospital there, but there is very few given doing the same thing that you're doing. And I want people to understand that each childbirth is absolutely different from the next one. So we cannot compare. We cannot, my threshold for pain is going to be different for so-and-so's. Yes, it can be a traumatic experience for me as opposed to Maria 5 hours down, where this is normal, this is natural, and blah blah blah.
But the afterbirth care for immigrant moms, one of the topics that's in the Immigrant Advantage, Claudia Coker writes about. We should bring her on the show to talk about this and the Danda and some other stuff. But I do remember that this was one of the things that she talked about, that actually in immigrant communities do have an advantage over mainstream American communities because of these kinds of practices.
And the book you're talking about is The Immigrant Advantage by Claudia Coker. And it actually, the whole premise of the book is that immigrants are healthier than, the U.S.-born population because of all these practices like the Quaresma, that they take better care of the person.
I think not better care. It's taken into consideration the birth mother and child, not better care. I don't want to say that, because people here are very well taken care of, but we take into consideration that the recovery for baby is much as well as needed as a mother.
So, and happy Mother's Day to y'all. Just a reminder, you can catch new episodes of The Little Radio Show on hmsnetradio.org every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time.
In honor of Mother's Day, we wanted to give you guys a few funny stories of our mothers and the things that we've experienced with them and the things we've seen them do. But I'm going to start with my funny story. Well, it's actually more of a memory that I have of my mom. Back way when I was a lot younger, about 5, 6, 7 years old, I remember my mother would on all kinds of occasions. She would we would make fun of her, and then she would chase us around the yard and then chase us up and down the street. And it was always funny because we were always sort of kind of barefooted. So she was barefoot chasing us up and down like the blacktop streets. And, my mom has always been very active, and I remember her being even more active when I was younger, obviously for obvious reasons, but that memory has always stuck with me. And another one was when she would take a shower and she would invite me into the restroom so I could scrub her back with those really, the ones, they bring from Mexico, those really tough and ones, the ones that would leave your back red. She would invite me in to do that. I hated doing it. I absolutely hated doing it, but I had to do it because obviously my mom asked me. So I would go in there and I would scrub her back, and she like, you got to push, Angelica, you got to do it really hard. And I'm like, no, but I'm going to hurt you. And she's like, just do it. And I would do it, and she laughed, and I was like, why is she laughing? Well, she didn't want me to scrub her back. She got me in there because, I was kind of I was a child that didn't like to take a bath a lot. She would pull me into the shower. So she would like dunk me into we had a bucket of water because we didn't have that great of running water. A bucket of water, she would like dip me into the bucket of water and like literally take me a bath. I mean, I still had clothes on, and she would like put shampoo and I'm like, no. But I was already this story that I'm talking about was when I was older, about 11, 12 years old. I was in middle school, and for whatever reason, like not that I never took a bath. It's just, I didn't want to take many baths during the winter, and I didn't. And my mom hated it. And I should have known better, but every time she would tell me, come scrub my back, I should have known better that I was going to be taking a shower or a bath or whatever.
You were dumb.
Yes, I was quite dumb.
So why do you think you hold those memories so fondly?
Of my mom? I don't know. I have no idea, but now you're making me think. I don't know. But yeah, that was one of the best memories. So I think one of the funny ones that I liked was my mom would take me a bath because I didn't want to. But Juan, you have a few funny stories that I've loved.
So I guess since we're talking funny stories, I mean, I have so many of them because my mom has always been a very strong character, and she still is. But, my mom, I always like to say that I get my sense of like my enterprising spirit from her, because she was always like looking for the next thing to do. So one of those things then that happened along the years is that we were living in the Rio Grande Valley, and we were living like in a small little house, a shack really, and we were we didn't really have a lot of means, but that didn't really affect our lives. We still had a good life and a good childhood, but I remember I think it was a summer, that there was a deer there. So we lived in the woods, and so there was nothing but woods surrounding us. And my mother was always looking for, she always wanted my dad to bring home game. She wanted him to go hunting and to bring home game so that we had, plenty of meat to eat at the house. And I remember this one time she saw a deer that was running pretty close to the house. Well, she went out there, and she was determined that she was going to get this deer, and that this deer was going to come home with her, and she was going to, have plenty of meat to feed her children for a prolonged period of time. And so she went out there, and the deer was pretty big, so she had to literally fight with the deer, pull it, like rope it and pull it all the way, and like, so she was actually like wrestling with the deer at this point, where they were like, her and the deer were like going at it. She was dragging her on the floor.
She was going at it.
And she was like literally going at it with that deer, but she managed to get her and tie the deer up to the gate. And so the irony of it all is that when my dad came home that evening, she was like, look, she was all proud of herself, like, look, I have a deer, I caught a deer today. And my dad was like, that's the property owners. We can't keep that deer. And so he went and like let the deer go.
No.
And she was so pissed. To this day, she still remembers that story. She's like, we could have had that deer. They weren't going to nobody was going to know about it. And but that's just, one of the funny stories about my mom that I always like remember, because, she was always like, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make it happen because I want to, and so that, to me, that's like a good representation of like who she is.
That's funny. I know you have several other stories, but I know we have limited time. Sandra, do you have any
funny stories? No, I have stories of my mom, of things that there's a story that we heard about when my mom and dad were going out together, and I always joke that I get stubbornness from both sides of my family, but most of my strong personality traits, actually I get more from my mother, who is a Leo, than I do from my dad, who's a Taurus. My dad was very, very old-fashioned, strict, man, but my mom had my dad used to say es chiquita pero picosa. And they went out on a date, and he made the comment about her skirt, that it was too short. And so the next time that they went out, she wore the same skirt, and she had taken it up 3 inches.
Oh.
And that was the absolute last time he ever criticized anything she wore.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
She took it up. She had taken it up 3 inches. Didn't say anything. Just got in the car, and my dad didn't say anything. That was it. She's like, he never
criticized again.
He never said anything about anything I wore again.
That's awesome.
And so that's the kind of character that my mom had. My mom always had the, she let my dad lead until it was time for her to intervene. So, for example, if my dad worked a lot, so she wanted to have some portraits put up, and he kept telling her he would do it, and he kept telling her that he would do it. And we had concrete walls, right? So he came home at the end of the day to find that she had drilled a hole in the wall because she couldn't figure out how to do it. But she took one of his drills, she drilled a hole in the wall, then she filled it with wood, and she put a nail in the wood, and she put up all of her portraits, all of her pictures. She gave him 2 whole weeks, and she's like, "That's it. I'm done. I'm doing it." And I can still remember my mom with that drill, and I'm like, "Oh my God, she's gonna kill herself." I was old enough that I knew what she was doing. Yeah. But this is, so I always laugh. It's like, yes, there's a great deal of my dad in me, but oh Lord, there's so much of my mother. And every year, and actually every day of every year, I find more of her words coming out of my mouth and more of what I do to be like her.
Like her.
Yes.
When you say that story, when you mention that you're more like her, I'm more like my mom. My mom has this story where she was going to work. She used to work at U of H as a janitor. She was going to work, and there was a couple she didn't know they were together, but it was a couple fighting on the side of the street, and the girl was like trying to get away from the guy, and the guy kept pulling on her. And my mom, being the person who she is, because I don't want to say I resemble her a lot, but I do. But on the side of the road, they were fighting back and forth, and my mom pulls over. She was on the way to work with her friend. They pull over, and they ask, my mom stops and says, "Do you need help?" to the girl, and the girl says, "Yes." She's like, "Get in the car." And so as the girl's getting in the car, the guy comes up to the car and looks at my mom and her friend and says, "What do y'all want? What are y'all doing here? Tell me your names." And my mom, very, very innocently, the way she does, always tries to dilute any situation. She says, in Spanish, I'm going to say it in Spanish really quick. She said, "Mi nombre es Pancho y ella es Pancha." So the guy can be very confused and be like, "What in the world?" So he left them alone. She drove off with the girl and gave her some money, dropped her off at the bus stop, and said, "Hey, go on your way." But I very much do sometimes resemble my mom, and that's just the character that she had, that I find myself doing a lot of things that she did, and sometimes they're not very safe. Mom, thank you very much. But we do find ourselves doing a lot of that stuff.
But it's that stuff, the quirky things.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, when we moved into the house, and there were no what do you call it? There were no drapes up. There was no curtains, and there were no curtain rods up. And I have this very vivid memory of my mom taking sheets and duct tape and duct taping the sheets to the walls because she didn't want people looking into her house until my dad put up curtain rods so she could have curtains up. And she took, and it was that metallic gray duct tape.
Okay.
And she put that up, and she put that up, and she taped up
the electrical wall tape,
yes.
The electrical tape she used and put it up.
And she taped up these sheets because she didn't want people looking into our house. Or, I have these very vivid memories of my sister and I, when I was a teenager. We'd come home from the dance, and my mom would wake up, and she would make us a sandwich, and we'd sit there, and we'd tell her about the dance for about 2 hours after we got home. And it happened every single time we got home from the dances. She would get up, and we'd talk, and we'd be exhausted the next day, because it wasn't just the fact that we'd been out to dance, but that we stayed up another 2 hours to talk. And we told her everything, who said what, and who had what on, and who we danced with, and it became almost tradition. I'd like to invite our audience to share their mom stories. What story do you remember from your childhood, or what thing that your mom used to do or still does that, most appeals to you? Please go on our Facebook wall or share it to us on Twitter or on Instagram. Tag us. We are at Little Radio Show on Twitter. We're at The Little Radio Show on Instagram. And we'd love to see your stories. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Little Radio Show. We invite you to check out our iTunes and our Stitcher channels and leave us a rating or a review. You can find the link to both channels at thelittleradioshow.com.